Hi, everybody. My name is Sue Starkey. I'm the Community Development Block Grant Coordinator in the Economic Development Office here at Town Hall, and I am officially opening up a Community Development Block Grant public hearing so that we can talk about an idea for an amendment to our grant covering fiscal year 22-23. I wanted to give some background information. This all came up based on a meeting on May 19th at the Town Council, where we had a request from residents to address the need for affordable housing, and in particular, a need for immediate assistance to prevent loss of housing due to a dramatic and unanticipated cost increase for local renters. Some people at the meeting mentioned that CDBG funds might be used as a funding option. I want to just give you some background information about these funds. First of all, they come from the federal government, they go down to the state, and then the state disperses them to the towns. There's only a limited set of activities that we can engage in. Those are established by the federal government and the state government, and they're also defined through a process of a community development strategy. And we always try to get resident input on the activities that are most important to them. The federal and state list of activities, you can see it's a long list here. One of the activities at the very bottom is public social services, and that might be where we could have an impact on these housing concerns. There is also the requirement that they be on the Southbridge Community Development Strategy. That doesn't list social services. The meeting tonight is your opportunity to speak up and say whether or not this particular activity should be added to our priorities in town. So our strategy had commercial and housing rehab with code enforcement, roads, recreation, beautification, fiber optics, and even a waste transfer station. Right now, the things that we are working on: housing code enforcement, housing rehabilitation, commercial rehab, and there are some road improvement projects and also a parks and recreation project that's in the works. Knowing this, we contacted the state Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities to ask what we might be able to do. And they did identify that we might use the funds for emergency grant payments. They can't go out to an individual, but they could go out to a provider. In this case, it would be a landlord. There are limits to what can be done. The payments can only be over 3 consecutive months, and it's a one-time payment, meaning nobody could go for 3 months and then wait a few months and come back for another payment. The state also said the only way that they would consider this request is if we had a public hearing. That's why we're here. What we want to ask you about is whether we should reallocate funds from code enforcement and move it over to this social service plan. We want to talk about the eligibility criteria for those who might be interested, and then any other comments that you have specific to this CDBG program. And I'll start with the reallocation plan. We had monies for code enforcement, but they weren't used because the positions weren't filled or there were short-term vacancies. So we're prepared to go to the state and say we want to use approximately $100,000 for this program. This is where I can ask for comments from anybody about the amounts. You can come to the podium and talk about your question, just so that anybody who watches this can hear you.
Thank you, Sue. My name is George Shenya. I'm a town councilor, and I lived at 23 Teresa Ave. I support the allocation of this $100,000 or around the $100,000 for the helping of anybody set by the guidelines. I believe it's set somewhere around 65 and above. The only thing I see is it's for FY '22-23 money.
That's the bucket of money that we have available that we can use because we are putting in an application to extend the grant funding period up till December.
Okay, and what's the 24-25?
They were not spent in the town's fiscal year '24 last year, and some of it wasn't spent this year.
Okay, so some of that money is going to be available for 24-25 later on?
Nope,
No.
because we were spending 22-23 grant funds in fiscal year '24 and fiscal year '25.
Okay.
It is set to run out and be completely expended by the end of December. That's the plan.
I asked the town allocate this $100,000 towards this fund. And I also ask in the future, as CCBG funding becomes available or suggestions at hearing, that the social services be added to the grant application. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can state your name and,
I can't hear you.
oh, you can state your name.
Yeah, Renata Kendall, I'm at 20C Therese Avenue. I just had a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to thank the town council. They're not here, but I hope they hear it, and trying very hard to get us to this point. It's not exactly what we're looking for, but it's better than nothing. So one thing that I wanted to know is the money that you're giving to the landlord, would that be just the difference of what the rent was raised at? Is that how it goes? Or you do pay the whole amount of the rent to the landlord?
That's up for discussion. That can be what this hearing is about. I'm starting to realize that I probably should go over the eligibility criteria that we were proposing, because it's kind of a package deal, how much money we have and how we might spend it.
Right. Well,
But if you have an opinion, this is the time to offer a suggestion about whether or not it should be to supplement what they could pay.
yeah, that's what I was wondering, whether it, for the non-voucher people, it was $700, whether they would just give the $700 to the landlord, or, non-vouchers, they went up quite a bit. In my case, I went up $272 a month. So, I'm just wondering if they pay the whole rent or just the difference. So that's one question I had. The other thing is this money only for elderly people and only for Section 8?
All right, you did the segue. I think it really is time I can just go over the eligibility criteria. So the next slide was the way that we thought about deciding who would be eligible. It's for renters, not homeowners. We picked age 65 years or older. And this is, open for discussion, but we thought it was a reasonable number. We want to limit it to people facing imminent eviction or loss of housing due to unexpected rent increases. Not to people who hadn't been able to budget, but to people who were taken by surprise. The rent increase, not just a little increase, but 25% more than what it was, and something that happened recently within the past 3 months. These are the points that are up for discussion. They're on paper as a starting place, and your input is important. The final criteria is how we would verify eligibility as far as their financial means. Tax returns, because we'd get a reasonable assessment of their assets. And also bank statements, because that's how we would see their cash flow on a monthly basis. Because if we know that people started off with a certain amount, and there's a certain amount coming in, and it's never going to keep pace with the new rent, we'll figure out how to do the math, but it's this concept that we're talking about. and these limits. So I'll turn the microphone back over to Renata. She's asking questions, not just for me to answer, but other people can give their input, okay?
The only other, this answers some of my questions. I had read it over. Already, but so this 100,000 will go to anybody in town that has tough times, because the majority of people here are all from Lebanon Hill Housing.
Yes,
Yes.
we wanted to be certain that we weren't limiting it to a certain group, but we were focusing on a specific concern.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Sue. Dave Adams, 1023 North Woodstock Road. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing this to the public. Just to clarify that this is fiscal year 22 and 23. This is money that was extended, and this $100,000 is left over. 24 and 25, I completely agree. If you didn't already spend it and didn't allocate it for anything else, utilize the $100,000 for this year. I would absolutely recommend that. That way it's there, because I know usually miscellaneous funds or something like that would be used for some other type of project, and you have to extend out until December 31st. I would say this, looking at this is kind of standard. This, as far as the 65 years old, the 25%, the statements, that's all standard information that's always requested when there's any type of funds like this given. Who would oversee this? Would it be you, Sue?
The Economic Development and Planning Office would find the way to do the work to get this done.
Would you hire somebody out to take away from that 100,000?
No, there's no money to hire anybody else.
Well, I didn't know if there was going to be somebody that maybe be part-time for them. This is a short-term, I'm assuming this is a short-term possible solution for the renters of this community that are 65 and older.
It is short-term because that's as long as the money will last. And it would turn to a discussion of whether or not we wanted to reallocate funds, but we couldn't even do that because we don't have any more administrative funds. We're just going to get the work done.
So you're going to do it probably in-house right over there, like you said. Okay. And then you don't know what next fiscal year would be like for the CDBG funds at all?
We do. And CDBG funds are always required to meet the requirements that I went over, and I'm not sure if you were here to see them. There's only a specific list of projects that are allowed and a shorter list of things that we're eligible for in this town. So there aren't plans for social services in the upcoming, cross your fingers, fiscal year 25 grant funding that we expect to get.
As of right now, because we've already delegated that for code enforcement, and hopefully somebody's hired on for that as well. Okay. So that being said, I mean, this is a very short-term fix, but it's doable for up all the way through December. And it'd be based on your criteria here. I wouldn't see why we would ask not for you to do this. At least this is for some individuals that can't do everybody in the town, but at least this is something that you can do right now for those that qualify. And most of these things, and some of you already know that, there is qualifications and there's only so much money to go around. So I appreciate you guys even coming up, but I highly recommend this is, besides some minute things, just move forward with this, just for the elderly that are renting right now. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for pointing out the limitations. There's only a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time, and we wish we could do more with CDBG. But I can tell you that the town has been looking at the issue of housing in a broader context, and Katie Yoder is here. She's been leading an effort and will be having a presentation that goes to town council soon for a more comprehensive plan. This is short-term to decide how to qualify people, short-term to spend the funds. But I think town leaders and those in the Economic Development and Planning Office that were here before me were smart to be thinking about this really important concern.
Very well, thank you. I just want to point out that I know this is about the CDBG money only. This is what the public hearing is for. But there's free cash that possibly could be utilized down the road. There's a lot of avenues the town council has right now. They could do that, even doubling the clauses that the abatements from the assessor's office And that, hopefully, the town council will be working on that in the new fiscal year as well, doubling that up, just like they did with the veterans' housing and property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jasmine Rivas, 40 Rogers Street. I'm also a town councilor. And I don't see the resident who called me, so I'm going to ask a question for them. So this money wouldn't displace the projects already for the housing rehabilitation and people that are on the list, homeowners that are on the list for that program. This would not displace
Correct.
their funding. Okay.
Yep.
I think that some people were not clear about that, so I wanted to make sure that that was stated during this hearing, because people do get nervous that they've been waiting a long time for their projects, and they're all, also elderly people who are on fixed incomes, and we don't want to pit one group of people against another. We want to make sure that it's fair for everybody. I also had another question, kind of just piggybacking off Mr. Adams, and so this money has to be spent by the end of next year, or by the end of this year?
Right now, the grant funding is scheduled to end at the end of June. We're going for an extension. The furthest out the extension can apply is to December 31st of this year.
Great. Okay.
And the funding, the monies that we are planning to use are monies that never got spent last year because the positions were vacant. So none of the other pots of money that were allocated to different projects are being decreased at all.
Okay. And so in the future, I know that not the 24-25 funding was already allocated for
Different.
for different projects.
Right.
But then in the future, could the social service aspect be added to maybe 25, 26, or further down the road?
Yes, and every year there's a process to invite townspeople, residents in to comment on how to best use these funds. So we can try a little bit harder to bring people in, and if we have some other community activities that might be addressed with CDBG funds, that might be a way to increase awareness that the town has a say on how to use these funds.
Okay. I also want to mention, and I hope when Katie comes up here, I'm sorry, I always blank on people's names. I apologize. My students were never happy about that. But when Katie comes up and talks about the housing production plan, I know in the plan, since I've been working on that with that group, we talk about in that plan about charging transfer fees for developers, and I think that as a counselor and thinking of other counselors should really think about that, because we really want to put the onus on the developers coming in, and placing a transfer fee on a developer that comes in and buys a property at a huge amount, millions of dollars, that can build up a fund for these exact situations, so that we're not scrambling at the last minute to help our residents, that we have something in advance, that we're ready, having some kind of fund that we're charging those developers as they come in and buy these projects. So I think that's something that I know that Katie could talk a little bit more about when it comes to the housing production plan. So
Thank you for planting a seed for future conversations about housing.
Kevin Buxton, 52 Charlton Street. I have been concerned with affordable housing ever since I came 2 or 3 days away from being homeless, being put on a bus, sent to Auburn or Worcester because there was no shelter available in town. I don't like talking about myself, but this situation of finding $100,000 to help these people by putting it in the pocket of the person that's creating the situation doesn't seem rightful or logical to me. Affordable housing for the elderly, we have the high rise. We have Dresser Street Park apartments, both of which are at least over 30 years old. We've added no inventory. When the project got built up on, is it Laurel Hill, the name of the, Lebanon Hill. I'm sure the developer who built this complex received subsidies and grants to put it in because it was needed for affordable elderly housing. It was never anything intended to be but affordable elderly housing. Now, these requirements for these developers to take this grant money has a time limit on it. And I'm sure one of the reasons that the Lebanon Hill project got sold is because the time limit ran out. And now the new person who bought the place says, well, that's enough with affordable housing for elderly. We're going to put the rent where we want it. The tenants that we lose, we'll just fill it with whoever we want. I cannot see creating another level of subsidized housing. Because if you want to look at what has caused, not just the rent issue on Lebanon Hill, but the rent issue throughout our town, it's subsidized housing. I'm well aware of the requirement that a person should only spend about 30% or 1/3 of their net income on rent. Like I said, I don't like talking about my own circumstances, but that would basically put me around a situation where I need to find affordable housing at around $725 a month. If you can find a landlord in town who would even talk to me for $725, I'd be surprised. However, that same landlord would tell me, do you have a voucher? Are you on Section 8? Because I'll take you $725, and then the government will slide me a check, probably more than that, and we're both happy. You're living within your means, and I'm making as much as I possibly can. I had a complicated issue of saying that the only way you're going to get the landlords to bring the rents down is to put some kind of surcharge on the rent. It's a free country. If a landlord wants to charge $10,000 a month for a crappy apartment, he can. It's a free country. However, I think there needs to be some realistic standard within our community of what we consider affordable without subsidy, and go by that. Now, like I said, just to use a figure, let's say Will Canoia, the assessor, used to give us a figure of the average single-family home in Southbridge. I tend to grasp on that because at the time, the average single-family home in Southbridge was paying $3,600 a year in taxes. That comes out to about $300 a month. $300 a month comes to about $10 a day for the average single-family home. Now, when I was facing homelessness, and I was lucky enough, I didn't have enough time to wait the 2.5 years it might get me to subsidize housing. Thankfully, the housing authority contacted a landlord with a rooming house. I ended up with a room in a rooming house for $600 a month. And I'm sure it was the cheapest possible rental opportunity. but it was a roof over my head. Now, that $600 a month was only $20 a day, but still, I'm still paying $20 a day for a single room and a shared bathroom, kitchen complex. And meanwhile, the average single family still paying 10. I'm not saying that we need to bring our rents down to a average single family home level, but I'm saying you can use that figure to establish what affordable housing is.
Kevin, I will thank you for your concern about affordable housing. I'll just ask that we return to the subject of tonight's hearing, and that is specifically for CDBG grant amendment,
All right.
and invite you, to speak up when there are opportunities to discuss that subject. So thank you.
Yes, and believe me, I've been working on this dialogue to present before the council because I think there's still not addressing affordable housing. As far as the $100,000 goes, it's a joke. There's people here who are facing $750 a month increases. If your program is only going to subsidize that, I just don't see it as being viable for all the people within the complex.
Thank you.
So I'd like Dave Adams again, 1023. I'll stick to the subject matter. My one question here is, can the landlords, let's say it's subsidized for those that are qualified individuals or families, can the landlord increase their fee after they've been approved? Let's say some of the individuals in here have been approved for some type of subsidy.
I don't know the answer. We might have another audience
an
member
answer.
who has an answer. I don't.
People that live there that are not on vouchers or Section 8 housing, they can raise their rent every month if they want.
Right, for the approval, because
Hey,
they have to
well-
get through state approval.
George, and Dave, if you're interested, you could both be at the microphone at the same time to answer the question, but they won't be
George,
able
I'll
to
share
hear
this
this
mic with
on
you.
the tape. So we don't know the answer, but it is something that we're concerned about. We don't want to say we'll pay more money only to have the landlord turn around and increase the rent so they get more money.
It's good to be up here with a couple winners. Where we live presently, and I believe the way the voucher system works here in Southbridge with the Housing Authority, whether it's Southbridge or the Worcester Housing Authority, is that a certain percentage of people live on vouchers where I am at. A voucher rent is set by the Housing Authority. I believe it's set at $14.39 or somewhere at that point in time. The landlord has the ability to raise the rent to the $1,700, and the voucher person would have to make up the difference. It used to be 30% of the income. Right now, for some people, it's 55% of the income that they charge out of pocket. The people that don't have vouchers, they pay the full rent increase of $700, and the landlord, technically, their leases are month to month. So by being month to month, they can raise the rent every month. Because Massachusetts doesn't have rent control at this point in time, there are some things before the House and the Senate that are looking to do something for that. But in the short term, and even in the long term, if that ever happens in Massachusetts, back in 1993, the state of Massachusetts voted down rent control. So, but
All right, we'll go back to the people at the microphone so that this taped meeting can be heard for anybody who's watching it afterwards. And Dave, I think what you're saying is that you don't want us to be putting money forward only so that extra money can be paid out.
That
to
would be
the
my number one concern, is that if you were able to, and I don't know what your previous slide stated, but my fear is, let's say you give a certain amount for those 3 months, because they do qualify, and then their landlord turns around and, what George said, decides, we're going to kick that back up another $300 because now you're being subsidized by the town through CDBG funds. And that'd be a concern of mine. I'm still for it. And maybe there's a math way a calculated way to, there be a percentage given to each individual based either by their income or a one flat fee or something like that. I'm not sure how that can work. I do know under Chapter 115, which is the veteran side of the house for rent and property taxes and stuff like that, there's a calculation used by the Executive Office of Veteran Services which takes the amount of money, the income, and helps offset the cost of the house now, or the housing. But in this case, the state is giving the money to the individual or the family, the surviving spouse. It's not giving it to the landlord. It's given to because of either Section 8 or some other benefits that they may receive. So I guess, is there any way you say, because it's a federal fund, that it has to pay these individuals, it has to pay the landlords instead of the individuals that are renting? Because I'd love to be able to see it reversed that way. Obviously, with oversight of income, because income also included not only Social Security or any SSDI, but it also included, let's say there was a life insurance policy in which you can pull from. That's income. That's possible income. So those are areas in which I would suggest people look at when they're doing the calculation up. But I still am for utilizing this. It's a short-term fix, and I do. Kevin had brought up it's not a lot of money, but it's something now because there was nothing before this meeting. So thank you.
Sorry. Councilor Rivas, 40 Roger Street. Just listening to that bit of conversation, I'm wondering if there could be some voluntary or like agreement that the landlord signs off that they wouldn't raise the rent for a period of time, and if they don't sign that, maybe allowing in the provision that the renter or the person can utilize the funding for a security deposit on another apartment, so that you're telling the landlord, okay, if you sign off and say you won't raise the rent for 6 months, a year, or whatever, then this money will be paid to you directly for the offset or whatever that might be. But if you don't sign off to that agreement, then the renter has the option to utilize that money for a deposit for a new place. I don't know.
Thank you for that idea.
Just an idea.
I wanted to say the funds can't be paid to an individual. The federal law makes that requirement. They can be paid to the provider. It's interesting that you just pointed out the monies that people need to come up with up front to move into a new place, often first, last, and security, which happens to be 3 months.
Right.
So in the plan as we've proposed it, it says to a provider for up to 3 months on a one-time basis. And this makes me sad because I have wonderful neighbors, and we all have wonderful neighbors who are trying to afford their housing and stay where they are. But if the situation stays as bad as it seems, then people will be making different plans. Right. And this plan that we're proposing today might really be enough to keep people from being homeless even for a short period of time. That 3 months grace or that 3 months payment, it can make a really big difference. It's $100,000 that we're limited to, but if we can help people get through whatever period they can before we move on to other strategies, it will help.
Yeah, if there was some guarantee, for the resident and for the town, right? We're putting the money up up for this. So I think trying to come up with a creative way where there are options for the resident.
Renata Kendall again. I just wanted to add a little something hopeful towards the otherwise very dire picture of 3 months of help. We had a meeting, George was there too, with the Secretary of Housing, right, George? And I received a call today, and there's a lot of things in the works right now. Our situation is on the governor's agenda on the table, has been mentioned, and so there's no quick fix. So 3 months right now would be perfect to get us maybe to the point where we can get some permanent help. And so the call was very, very positive today. I have to say, I feel really good about it. There's a lot of things that hopefully will happen, but it's not something that's going to happen next week. So I'm very grateful that we at least have this money available. Thank you.
Thank you. More people, more comments, more ideas on how to tweak the plan that we've talked about already? We did save seats, and we're welcoming comments. Thank you for coming in, for talking about this attempt to use CDBG funding through an amendment. The process is that this will be written up and it will go to town council for approval. If they approve it, we'll go to the state and say, this is what we would like to do. And then we need approval from the state. So there's a few steps that we have to go through, but we're moving through it quickly. And the state is aware. At the source of the funding, they know it's important, and now we've heard that at the governor's office, they know it's important. So I feel like this is one part of the solution. Does anybody have something more that they want to add to this idea about CDBG funding?
I'm so sorry again, Sue. Real quick. Oh, I appreciate it too, but this is, we do Chapter 115 for the veterans and all that. One thing that we're allowed to do, so under Chapter 115, we're allowed to do first, last, and security deposit. So that's 3 months.
Right.
That also gives them, and Councilor Rivas has brought it up, is maybe find another place that's more affordable, and then they get those 3 months worth of to pay for that while they move along with their lives at the same time. So that's not a bad idea, but other benefits do the same thing. Thank you. My apologies back there too.
All right, I live in town, so I can ask a question. And if there are people who know about the other coordinated efforts, I know that our residents have been working on this cooperatively. I understand that there are other groups that are looking into this, and I hope that they'll be able to continue to share ideas like this so that we have something to work on now and something to work on in the future. And I want to thank all the people that are doing all that work. Any more ideas for this phase?
Can I ask what the timeline will be after you close the hearing on what the possibility of this happening? Does this go to council for a vote?
Yes.
Will that be Monday night?
Monday, yes. That's the plan, that it
So
will
you'll
go
talk to the town
them.
manager and place it on Monday nights, and then these people can come back here on Monday night and speak to council and ask them to support it? Is that what we're looking for too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That is the plan. So that's how it'll move forward. From this group to the town council, to the state, and then hopefully implementation. All right. I do want to thank everybody again. It is 6:42. Unless anybody has something more about the CDBG amendment, I'm going to bring the meeting to a close and thank you all. Thank you.